Brewtallyspeaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. For over 30 years, Rockabilia has been the go-to destination for all things band merch. With over 500,000 items in their online store and collaborations with today's hottest bands, you're sure to find something you love. Use our code BREW10 at checkout and take 10% off your total order. So go pick up your favorite new piece of merch now over at Rockabilia.com. And now, on to the show.
Passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give up.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Brewtallyspeaking podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guests are Tim Lambesis and Ken Susi of As Lay Dying, although the email started way back, months ago, in preparation for the new Austrian Death Machine Quad Brutal, which is out now via Napalm Records. I had put in to have Tim come on the show. He's someone I've always wanted to have on. And I didn't think it was going to happen, honestly. And there was some back and forth with the publicist and all these kind of things. And I kind of got a little apprehensive about how well I would do with this conversation. Because, in full transparency, it was really stressed to keep it solely about, the music and nothing else. And if you know me and you listen to this show, then you know that I'm not someone, and I'm not saying these are superficial things, but you know that I like to go deeper. I like to kind of get more of an understanding of who someone is and just how they are and how they make decisions and things like that, because I think it's more of what I'm interested in. And I think ultimately showcases how the music or the creative side of this person really works. And so for me, when getting to do this, I kind of was texting with Ken, going back and forth about, I'm kind of nervous and you know how I like to do things and I don't want to get in trouble. But I feel like it'd be not being me authentically to just do a quote unquote more basic style interview. And so at one point I was like, I think the day of us doing the podcast chat with Tim, I was like, what might be kind of cool is to maybe have you hop on for a minute, kind of surprise him. But then I think, for me, what I think that'll ultimately accomplish is that, maybe it'll make Tim feel more at ease knowing that I know you and that, we're friends. And if I have questions or whatever, that it's not coming from anywhere. I'll have kind of been vetted, basically. And it's something where I didn't expect Ken to stay on the whole episode, but I honestly do think that it made the conversation better, because it's something that I find so interesting. And I actually, I was just doing this earlier this week where I was texting friends that are coming through on tours. And at one point I had texted a friend that does more tech and in arena size tours. And I was like, hey, would it be okay if I followed you for the day and just kind of watched what you do and to kind of see this arena show get put together? Because I find it fascinating to see how all the behind the scenes things work. That's why something like Tank the Tech, when he does his tour vlogs, and you really get to see stage production getting done and everything that goes into the behind the scenes stuff of what he does as a tour manager, with some of the other people do on the road behind the scenes. And to me, it's kind of fascinating to just see how all of these things happen that for the most part we never see, but it's such a huge part of the thing we're all there for, which is to experience these songs and this music that we love in a room full of other people. And so the other part of that too that I always find interesting is just the band dynamics, and I don't think a lot of people really focus on that, but it's so huge in why a band sustains their career and, is able to keep making music together or keep touring together. And there's something when you listen to this chat that I think having Ken be involved in even talking about how he felt about Tim and what he was writing in either Austrian Death Machine or, things like that, that I think it just really showcases the admiration that they have for one another, as well as just the friendship that's really at the core of everything. And to me, I thought that was just such a really great way to maybe bring Tim out a little bit more than you're used to seeing him, especially because at this point, the only thing I've really seen him on where I felt like it kind of touched on this, but a lot better, was Garza's podcast. But I don't have that same kind of rapport that Garza does with Tim, so to expect the same kind of conversation and honesty and just the all of that, I don't think would have been fair. So I'm really thankful that Ken agreed to come on and help me with this. I think it made it, like I said already, it made it infinitely more interesting. And I really want to thank Tim as well. At some point, he could have just been like, fuck you, I'm not I'm not going to do this if we're not really here to talk about Austrian Death Machine, which we do. We just kind of found our own way to do such. But greatly want to thank those two. And without further ado, here is my conversation with Ken and Tim, and I'll talk to you all on the other side of it. Listen, all weird. It's like the NSA.
Yeah, is it cool that I'm not a camera on here?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, just so you know, I'm trying. I'll tell you my reasoning for not being on camera when we're live.
Okay. I mean, I hit start now, so technically that's a thing.
Yeah, Ken, let's explain to us why you're here but not here.
Well, I'm trying because I'm in Massachusetts, right? So it gets real cold here. You get a couple of one extra, two extra raviolis at the end of your meal. I'm trying not to be a complete meatball, which it's easy to do in Massachusetts weather. Standing next to the Adonis, Tim Lambesis on stage. I'm just trying not to be like, oh, is that Danny DeVito standing next to Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Well, it doesn't ever come across that way, but I appreciate that makes me feel nice.
Well, I'm trying to do more push-ups on stage than I ever have with you guys, just to let people know that I have something to work towards.
Yeah. If people are wondering what happened to your gains, you got to say, well, we've been off tour for a few months, and I only do push-ups on stage.
Oh my God, yeah. Men in my hockey locker room or my soccer field, they're juggling my tits right now, so it's not good. So I gotta get back into show shape.
Yeah, I saw you last week. You look just fine. So
thanks. Well, there's your headline.
So something, kind of, because a lot of times I don't really talk about the thing necessarily because I feel like it really dates a conversation versus having it kind of be timeless. But something that I find interesting, your wife is on the new Austrian Death Machine record. And I always find it interesting when spouses work together. Like, how do you navigate working with your spouse in such a creative space?
Well, it's kind of nice in my situation because we didn't sit down and have this conscious effort to work on music together. She just this is her favorite genre of music, and even after all 20 something years of playing this music, it's still my favorite genre of music personally. That doesn't mean there's a lot of there's definitely plenty of garbage in our genre, so I don't like every band or anything, but when a good record comes out in the heavy music genres or subgenres, that gets me more excited than anything. And so we share that in common naturally. And then one time we were setting up the microphones to record an Austrian Death Machine song called No Pain, No Gain. And Craig Goliath is a bodybuilder, so he's a musician also, but doesn't have tons of studio experience. And we needed somebody to check the microphone and do the first few lines of the song, get it all going. And he was a little bit shy that day, and understandably a lot of people are in the studio. And Danny had a couple drinks, and she's just like, well, let me give it a shot. And so she just jumps in front of the mic and just let it rip, and had never done it before. And all of us in the room were just blown away. And so we just kind of stepped back and we're like, dang, I need to write a song for her to sing on after we finish this one. So that's how it all came together. And then since when it comes to songs for Danny, I'm the songwriting producer for us, right? I don't have to go consult with a whole bunch of people. I just kind of make the song, and when it's ready, I bring it to Danny and say, here's what I wrote. Here's some patterns. Here's some lyrical concepts and ideas. let's refine it to make it feel more like you. But it's like, I do 90% of the work on my own, so we're not like in a studio at each other's throats all day.
It's just an interesting thing because, and I've talked about it on the show a little bit, but my wife and I ended up working at the same company for a little while. And the thing that was a little bit hard after a while was inevitably, as you do, you kind of complain about your day or whatever. But when you literally can't get away from the job because it's the same one, same people, same everything, it just was causing a lot of non-separation of work and home balance. And eventually when I decided to leave, like even in my exit interview, I was like, I choose my marriage over this job and I will any day. Like, but I think it's a thing where sometimes I could see it being a really good thing where it probably strengthens the marriage and the bond because it's something else you get to bond over. But I could also see it being kind of a thing where maybe if you have a stressful day in the studio, that it's like, okay, now we're home, and kind of maybe taking the stresses of the day out on each other as well. So I just didn't know how that is for you two.
Yeah, I think in my situation, I haven't turned a profit on a single song that Danny and I have done together yet. So it's not like I have to work on a song with her to to make ends meet. So I typically just do it when we're both in a really good mood, and otherwise, I'm in my studio right now. It's under construction, so I just redid some bass chops. So I got some weird looking panels back there. But yeah, I'm in here, a good portion of my day working on something, and I'll pop my head out there and say, hey, I really want you to check this out. What do you think? That's kind of like a refreshing way to interact, as opposed to like if we were in if there's two cubicles in here and we were working back to back and we started venting to each other, because I'm actually really sensitive to negativity, right? So like I'm one of those people where somebody's just telling me about their day, and if they just give me one too many pieces of negative information, I'm like, overload, So we don't have to deal with that, fortunately. And but I know what that feels like. I've been in that situation before.
Yeah, actually, I'd definitely like to hop in and just say, like, having toured with Danny probably for 2 years now, I'd say that she is probably, her instincts are probably more metal than any of the As I Lay Dying guys in the bus. Like, she likes literally two types of music, and it's like anything like Pantera or anything heavy, and if it's not anything like that, she does not care. And like that's way more hardcore than any of us are. So she has like a natural ability to sing, but also she's, I don't know, what can I say, Tim? Is she elitist?
She's gone so far as to say I've had a hard time being super close friends with somebody who doesn't like metal. Yeah.
But no, she definitely, like, she's awesome. Like, she just knows metal inside and out, and like that's all she cares about. And she's like, she reminds me of like when I was like 13, 14. Just listen to metal and refuse to listen to anything else, and her brain's just so dialed into it that she's really good at it, especially when she like vocalizes.
Was gonna say too, you just commented on something about not taking in too much negativity. Is that something that you have kind of come to learn how to navigate somewhat recently, or is that something you've always kind of been in tune to?
I think for me to mentally survive some of the circumstances, and this is just across life as a whole, but I think the most drastic example would be, there was a stretch of like a month where I spent in isolation, and then a gap, and then I spent like 3.5 more months like on lockdown. And in those situations, if you don't like figure out a part of your brain to not dwell on the negative and to find like that positive little tiny nugget of hope to like get you through it, then you start to crumble. And as a person, you just, it's a really weird, it's impossible to describe, and I can't really put it into words, but there's something that happens in your brain where you either figure out how to survive or you literally go crazy. And so I think ever since that, I sort of realized what the cap is for me. It's like, okay, this is the cap of negativity, because when I really look around at life, like right now, I mean, I live half a mile from the beach. I'm not struggling to pay my bills. I get to play music for a living. Generally speaking, I have good health, all that kind of stuff. And so it's like, if I fought like hell to get to this position and I'm still going to complain about it, that's like, that's the worst tragedy there is, So I got to like put a cap on complaining.
Well, I'd just be like, hearing you say that sounds like a very, for me having gone to therapy, was like setting boundaries and the power of no. And like, it's a thing where when I hear people say these like certain things, it kind of triggers like the same instances when I heard it in therapy where I'm like, okay, that seems like something you've learned about yourself, that you have to, put this boundary in place, and just for the sake of your own perseverance or preservation. And so to me, when I hear that, I think it's a really important thing to kind of discuss, and how people navigate going through that and how to do that properly where it's, not a detriment to your own mental or physical well-being.
Yeah. And it's like the gratitude, from what I've learned, it's like a muscle, it's a skill, it develops. Like if you practice gratitude, for people out there that have gratitude journals and just write down what they're thankful for, that actually strengthens that part of, the neuroplasticity in that part of the brain. It starts to connect more. And, it's just, if we practice negativity, we feed the negative part of our brain. And so I have to put a cap on it, and that boundary, like you mentioned.
The other thing that I kind of find interesting, and as I kind of, I know ADM is sort of perceived to be a little bit of like a joke, but I think it's interesting because even in what we're discussing right now, I feel like there's so much of what Arnold has taught people through bodybuilding, through his public speaking and so forth, that these things kind of, you can't help but kind of take them in and be motivated by them, and kind of want to be a better you through, I guess, sort of an osmosis. Like, do you tend to find, even when writing these songs, that there's like, you're like, okay, I know, like, don't be lazy. Like, yeah, that's funny. But like, also, yeah, don't be fucking lazy. Like, don't be.
Yeah. Well, one of the things is I was originally looking for royalty-free clips of Arnold. Like, specifically, like he goes and speaks inspirational speech at some convention or whatever, and there's hundreds of people in the room that record that, and then they put that online. And it's not like if I took an actual Arnold clip from Terminator 2, I'm not sure, like, if it's Universal Pictures, or I can't remember who the studio is that did that, but then I'd have to pay some absurd amount of money to use like just 1 second of his audio. So I grabbed these clips from these inspirational speeches, and I started putting them into songs. And I was like, oh, this is cool because I can have the real Arnold like on a bunch of these songs, and then that made me realize, like, kind of like you're saying, is like, holy crap, there's so many good inspirational moments. And then so there's a song on the new Austrian Death Machine record called Conquer, and it's about this really inspirational quote he wrote about the meaning of life is not simply to exist, to survive, it's to go forward, to move ahead, to conquer, right? And he's, for anybody who's just struggled to survive, it's like, hey, that's not what we're meant for. And it's like, well, that's legitimately inspirational. So it's like, well, how do I make that song feel funny? Because it's not funny. It's like, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna write the heaviest, most inspirational sounding song I've ever like done for Austrian Death Machine. And the irony is it's like, that's one of the biggest complaints people have, is like, hey, like that song is like too serious and too good, and it's too modern, and it's too, it's like, I need the music to be less good and sort of to be more like silliness. It's actually like a legit criticism.
It's interesting because, like, I had this like epiphany the other day, obviously, and this might be a weird parallel, but there's a band like Ice Nine Kills, and I wonder, if it's hard or if it's the inspiring part of like figuring out the puzzle of, okay, for them, like, okay, I love this movie. How do I condense a movie down to 2.5, 3 minutes, whatever, plus keep in the parts that make it what it is? And I think they've done a really good job, but I feel like, I wonder if like Spencer and them are like, we've really pigeonholed ourselves into this. How can we keep outdoing ourselves? And I kind of wonder if the same thing happens for you, like where you're like, okay, now where do I take this? Like, how do I top what I just did? Like, are you constantly thinking of that? Or are you constantly being inspired by different Arnold things that you're watching, or just different things in general, with the idea of, hey, I still have these quotes, these movies I can pull from?
Yeah, so I try to marry the line or the quote with what the song feels like to some degree, and part of the and I think part of the humor is actually in that. So there's like a song called "Hey Bro, Can You Spot Me?" And the reason I made that the quote to go with that song is the song sounds so sincere. It's like there's nothing like silly or like over the top about the song. It's like very sincere, like almost like slightly emotional. And to put like, "Hey bro, can you spot me?" over like a very emotional chorus, to me is hilarious. Like, so I try to marry the lyrics that fit. And so that when it comes to songs like "Hasta la Vista, Baby," which is like one of Arnold's most famous quotes of all time, I just have never found the song to match that with yet. And I'm sure it's going to come along someday. And so I have a list, like a long list of potential quotes, so I just haven't found the like song that fits it perfectly.
I think that song needs maracas and kind of like that kind of Tijuana vibe.
Possibly, but it's also got to be sentimental because it's like the set. Once you release the song "Hasta La Vista, Baby," that's your set closer for every live show for the rest of your career.
Someday when we're in San Antonio, Texas, I'll take you to this 24-hour amazing Mexican restaurant, and there's a mariachi band, and then they'll play. I'll pay for them to play "Sorry Baby, Forgive Me If I Didn't Tell You I Loved You," or whatever that song's called, and then you'll have inspiration for that.
All right, sounds good. I'll just rewrite that song plus a breakdown, and I'm good.
Yeah, just one mosh part in the middle, and you're fine.
See, I just figured you would go get Matt from the Bronx and do like an El Mariachi Bronx ADM collab.
I'm open to it, especially for that song. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the quotes, there's just so many great quotes, and it's really a hard thing to pick on the serious side when you get into his inspirational speaking. It's like, well, there's a lot of great songs there, but then they're not really as catchphrasey. Like, right, people might not recognize them. So there's like a fine line of figuring out what to do. And then the worst case scenario is, if you remember like 90s action films, everything had a sequel that was just a recycle of the first things. So I could literally just do Get to the Chopper #2, or like,
right.
If it bleeds, we can kill it #2. You know what I mean? So.
What's the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie that like he has a daughter? Is it Commando and he has to save her? I think that might be one of my favorites of all time.
So the interesting fun fact about that, amazing movie, but he hadn't quite refined the one-liner. So there's one-liners in that movie for sure. But I feel like his best one-liners really hit like, Terminator 2 had the most amount of one-liners, which is crazy because it's not even like silly at all. And so he just like hit his stride, I think, around Terminator 2.
I think for me, and I don't know if it's not an obvious quote, but it's from The Last Action Hero, and it's one of my favorite quotes from that movie. But it's, Tar usually sticks to most people.
Yeah, the only Last Action Hero quote I've used is "Rubber Baby Buggy Bumpers," which is a little bit obscure also, but
yeah, didn't know I was going to say that, did you?
Yeah.
Well, I thought Ken was coming in for a second.
Oh no, I was gonna say you should probably write a whole album based around his his bicep size and his hip. Use the numbers within his body for breakdowns and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. I feel like that's how a lot of modern laptop core bands write their breakdowns anyway, right? It's just you add the number of Arnold's biceps, the width of his quads, his waist measurement, shoulder measurements, and you just put that into chug patterns and you're good.
I was gonna say, how heavy that song's gonna be if you get the right combo.
Yeah, well, it'll probably take me a couple of years to write, but at his physical prime when he won Mr. Olympia, multiple times, but let's just pick his greatest year. I want to get the measurements for that, and Ken, we're gonna on the bus one of these days figure out how to make that into a song of chug patterns, and then the song will just be called "The Greatest Physique of All Time."
That's what I'm saying. I mean, I'm just going to go out there and say that this interview may be over in like an hour and a half or so, so I'll be free maybe a half hour after that.
Sounds good.
I think the other thing, too, for me, I didn't know who Craig was, but it seems like, and I don't know if this is really a concerted effort on your part, but I feel like you're putting kind of a spotlight on people that maybe others don't know from this scene. I know Joey from Wolves at the Gate, they're, guys have been on the podcast a couple times and so forth, but I just wonder if that's something maybe you're kind of trying to, as a Jostaism, put the ladder down and kind of help bring some other people that you admire their talents and give them a platform to kind of be something bigger than maybe they've had the ability to do at this point.
Yeah, I think the key factor for me is not having to worry about the finances of an Austrian Death Machine record, right? Because it's I hope it does well, and they usually have historically done very well, but it's not going to make or break whether I pay my bills. And so I'm going to include my friends, and if my friends happen to be super famous, awesome. And if it's my wife who's never had a song in the history of the world until now, then it's going to be that, and it's cool to have that. I mean, Craig is more famous than any musicians not any, but most musicians in one sense in the bodybuilding community and in terms of financial achievements, and just his 1 million plus followers on Instagram or whatever else it is. He's had his great achievements in one area, but he grew up loving metal and playing in metalcore bands when he was 2001, 2002, that era. And it just the world never knew that about him. And it's like, well, dude, like the bodybuilding community and the music community need to overlap more. So that was a really cool opportunity.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. I half expected when I saw initially that I just saw Bleeding Through on the last track for I Never Quit. And I figured it was going to be Brandon coming on, because I figured obviously with him being super big into fitness and stuff like that, it seemed like a pretty obvious guest feature on that side of things.
Well, yeah, it is a Brandon. It's just a different Brandon from Bleeding Through, technically. But what's interesting about that is Brandon Chae and I were going to do one of the songs together on this record. Him and I are good friends. And just timing-wise, because of vinyl manufacturing times, I got this message from the label like, hey, we need this record turned in Monday. And it's like, okay, well, Brandon, unless you can come to my house tomorrow, which was a borderline possibility because we live about an hour and a half from each other. It just timing wise couldn't get it done in time. And I was self-mixing, so I stayed up till 5 a.m. fixing the mix, and of course that sonically some songs on every album sound a little bit better than others, but you can tell when I listen back, I'm like, oh wow, I definitely mixed that at 5 a.m. But
so then I would assume then you would be more apt to maybe want to do a re-record or remaster down the road eventually for these things, so you could kind of give it one consistent sound.
No, I mean it does have a consistency. I'm not saying that. I think the album actually has a lot of really cool varying productions, because we referred to the song Conquer earlier, which is I think all the way down tuned to G. Actually, I know it is. And then you've got older style thrash songs that are tuned way up. And I just think sometimes when you're applying that mix to a whole album of songs, just some stuff just settles in a little bit better than others. And it's just the nature of it. It's not a huge drastic difference, and I don't think the average listener is going to be thrown off by it. But as a studio nerd, I knew that I could have done a little bit better. But I'd rather put my time into the next Christmas EP and having Arnold get a chance to bless everybody's holiday.
I just want to go on the record and say I filled in for Austrian Death Machine once on a New England Metal Fest, and yeah, this record's pretty good, but it's not as good as the old stuff, right? But people are going to say that anyway.
Right. Thanks, Ken. I really needed that. It's not as good as when Ken played guitar.
Right, for one show.
Right.
Ken coming in with that honest, what is it, the honest Germans, as I like to call it, just saying something but giving you a backhanded compliment at the same time.
Oh, dude, we always get, I'm sure As I Dying's gotten that, but with in the Unearthed days, we used to stage theatrics was a thing, throwing cabs, running around. But when you become a headliner and have to play 17 songs, you start getting a little gassed. And Germans would be like, oh, your set started off really good, but then what happened? It's like, dude, I got tired. I've been drinking whiskey on stage for an hour.
Ken was present for this, and I still to this day don't know if this was dry sarcasm or not, but we were at a signing at a festival, and a German fan came up to me and he goes, oh, you're a lot weaker in person, weaker, and then he shook my hand and took a picture with me and then walked away, and that was it. And I don't know if he was busting my balls like German, or if he just was like, man, I thought you were going to be big and muscular and you're just this tiny dude. Just I don't know, I guess someday I'll figure it out.
Well, maybe you're an Adonis, so he was trying to make a joke. It's pretty tough to there's no way. Was he thinking you're literally? I mean, how tall are you? 6'3"?
Yeah, I'm the guy who's 6'3" that's always taller than everybody else who says they're 6'3". So my wife tells me I need to say 6'4".
Yeah.
Because I think everybody who's 6'3" lies. I'm the guy who's 6'3" who's not lying. So let's just say I'm 6'4".
Yeah, when I'm 5'7", and when I played college hockey and stuff, they put it in the transcript that I was 5'10". So you might be a 6'7".
Well, I was told this legitimately by a WWE prospect back in the day, that he was trying to get me to go to their training center, and I said I don't think I'm big enough. And at the time, I was 6'3", obviously still, but I was probably only 230, and I'm 250 now, right? And I was like, I don't know, man, I'm not big enough to that. He goes, dude, you're 6'3", 230. We would bill you as 6'7", 270 pounds. Like that's what we would just
You
say
put
about.
lifts in your shoes too.
And I was like, oh, okay. So and then I didn't think that was true, kind of, because I was like, oh, maybe this guy's just blowing smoke, until I met Chris Jericho in person, and he didn't even come up to my shoulder, and I was like, oh, but they say he's like 6 foot, like, or whatever, it is, and they say he's, 200 and whatever pounds, and it's like, and there's no disrespect to him. I'm just saying this is the nature of entertainment. It's like they just, whatever the person is, they add 3 inches and 30 pounds, and they say this guy's a monster, and they keep the cameras in the ring at a low angle, and it works out.
I was gonna say, look at Sylvester Stallone.
Stallone's small. He's Italian. He's a meatball. I was going to say, I have a question. Can I ask a question on your podcast?
Sure.
All right, Tim, if you were in the WWE, right, would you be a good or bad guy? Would you wear like feathers or leather? Or like what would be your persona? What would be your name? What would be your vibe?
I mean, when I was a kid, I thought Warrior was out of his mind in like the most entertaining kind of way, and he had, technically speaking, he had feathers, but for lack of better terms, I don't know like the appropriate. But when I was a kid, obviously it was a different world back then, and I was like, oh, like, if you wear feathers, does that just automatically somehow change you into becoming a gay person? Like, everybody didn't know like these things back then. They thought that like, if you wore too much pink, that all of a sudden it changed your like your sexual preference or whatever. And so everybody was scared to wear that kind of stuff. And Warrior just came out just like, oh, I'm wearing feathers, I'm wearing pink, and I'm going to beat up everybody in the ring.
Assholes.
So I feel like, to me, the most like masculine thing you could possibly do is just not even care at all, and just go out in the ring, and who cares like how insane you look, but just act like how Warrior acted, where like when he did those on-camera interviews, it looked like a dude who had just lost his sanity, and if you touched him, you were probably going to die. So I think that's an intimidation factor.
So I've done a lot of thinking about it too. So like I would cut. I would definitely cut, and I'd be kind of like more Rick Rude-ish, you know what I mean, or like a Tony Danza style, and I would grease myself up so much that my whole thing would be Italian. You can't grab me because I'm too greasy. And I would definitely come out to Kiss's Let's Put the X in Sex, because the lyrics are love's like a muscle and you make me want to flex. And I would just chop at my groin and with like fireworks for like hours before my match. That's what I would do. What's your theme song?
That's very fitting. For my theme song, that's a really hard one. I don't know. I'm going to dodge the question just because I don't have a great answer right now. But I am a serious question. Was Warrior? I guess he was Ultimate Warrior back then. Was he a good guy or a bad guy? Was he a heel or not?
He was always a good guy, a face.
Okay.
He was a wild card. He wasn't necessarily good or bad, but he leaned good. But what he was like how like Animal is to the Muppets. Like he just doesn't speak, and he just does wild shit. But he's cool.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's like, because if you're going to play a role, like I'm clearly not going to just be my normal self, and I did not mean to spend all this time talking about wrestling, but I would just be the most exaggerated version of myself possible, because otherwise it's like, oh, that just looks like Tim on stage, right? It's like, no, I got to be different. I got to be like some extreme version of myself.
Well, this is all fitting.
I was going to say, I would almost ask then, I mean, kind of parlaying off of that, but like, do you not play kind of a character of yourself cranked to 11, like when you're performing? Because I feel like, having seen you off stage, like in the one interaction with Ken and all of you guys last time you were in town, seeing you on stage, it's like, I know that's not who you are 100% of the time. No one's going to walk around just pretending to slam shit all the time. Like, that's weird. Unless you're Ultimate Warrior. But it's a thing where, like, I would feel that there is a little bit of a performance of Tim on stage versus you normally.
Yeah, and so I think the sincerity is that it is a portion of my personality that I compartmentalize and allow the outlet of that, because I do remember when I was 13 years old and I first heard like Master of Puppets or Vulgar Display of Power, like those records that were coming out, like those are actually Vulgar Display of Power in particular. I heard that they played a couple of those songs on the radio when I was a kid. And I remember just the feeling that I got. It just felt like barbaric, and so it's like, man, I love that feeling. I love that, like departing from the regular rules of society for a moment while you just enjoy a song. And I think that part of me is absolutely sincere. But if you ever spend time with me off stage, it's the other parts of my personality, which are primarily mellow. You know, I don't really raise my voice much. I'm sorry to let people down. I'm not much of a crazy partier, you know what I mean? And I just enjoy hanging out with people that make me feel good and writing songs.
To actually speak to that, Tim's like, you know, on an outside perspective, because I've, you know, been in a band for like 20 years, but not with Tim. The thing I like about Tim is that he's consistent. Voice is always strong, like presence is always like strong, but like, yeah, you're not the type of singer that like has to psych up the room, does like 10 fake push-ups to make yourself look good, you know, like think you're pumping yourself up. You don't like fool yourself into like being like, oh, I gotta be sick. Like, you wet your hair, you go out there casually, and then you just like tear the stage up, which is something I appreciate because most singers have a lot of ego, and Tim's kind of very humble towards the whole thing. But when it's time to work, he's really on top of his game because he's just he's so dialed into what he does.
Thanks, man. That means a lot.
Well, I feel like I kind of got a glimpse of that. Like I said at your last show, like there was a moment during the set, Tim, you had come off, the rest of the band's still on playing something. And there was just kind of a moment like, and these are why I like kind of being more side stage or like right up front, like where I can see all these things, but like this was kind of a backstage thing. But you were just kind of like taking the show in, like watching your guys play. And I know you had your inners in so you can still hear everything, but it was just kind of interesting to watch you watching them and have a smile on your face, like watching them enjoy playing. And I don't really think I've ever really seen so many people that are able to kind of step out of themselves and out of the moment for just a second to kind of really appreciate like what they're doing. And to me, I thought that was kind of a really cool thing. And it was kind of weird because then when I was like, shit, I'm staring, I think you realized I was looking, and then you were like kind of quick fist bump and then went back. And I was like, okay, like maybe it wasn't that weird or awkward that I just kind of noticed that. But do you do that often? Like you kind of take yourself out of the thing for a minute to kind of recenter yourself?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because I've never thought about it until now. But when I walk off stage, the moment I get to side stage with our monitor guy or just by myself, I like walked out of character to become myself for a little bit before I get back on stage and be the character again. But when I'm side of stage watching it like that, if you were to tell, you know, me as a 13-year-old, like, to go back to that, hey, you get to watch two of your favorite guitar players, like you would get to just like sit on the side of the stage and just like watch them, you know, just play an instrumental for a while or whatever. I really do. You know, if Phil and Ken were putting on like a dueling harmony guitar solo guitar clinic, I would go. Like if I wasn't in this band, I would go just because like I think their guitar work is phenomenal to watch. And so I think you're allowed to be a fan of your own band. I don't think that's like egotistical or anything like that. I really enjoy what I do.
Yeah, I'd even say that speaking on like, you know, on my behalf, it's like we play so many good shows, and we play. I mean, not every one of us has played bad shows too, but like because you're performing, because you're getting into the songs and trying to do your craft well on stage, you don't get that moment really to reflect until after the show. And half the time, me and Tim run off stage, and you know we'll play a massive concert like Bakken in front of like 90,000 people, and be like, "Did we play good? Like, how did it go? You know, like, how did you do?" Like, we ask all these questions. We're all so neurotic, but like to get that opportunity, sometimes you like when you get that moment, you stand back and you absorb it, and it's only for like maybe I don't know 1 minute you get to do that, but it is pretty like gratifying to get that moment because you don't get it often.
For sure.
I just think it's I think for me, like, I think we're always so focused on, and you can apply this even to like working out and just people and doing things that are more goal centric and oriented. But I think we're so focused on just head down, do the work, that we don't really ever take a moment to just kind of realize like where we are, how far we've come, and really kind of enjoy the work that went into getting to this thing, whatever that thing happens to be. And like I said, seeing you side stage for like all of like 30-40 seconds, in my head I was like, oh, I think this is what he's visualizing, what he's thinking. Like just kind of he didn't, like, as soon as he went past that curtain, it seemed like, okay, I'm back to being me. And then to see you be able to turn it back on and go, it's not something you get to see all the time. And to me, like, it was a moment where obviously it meant something to me, and I've taken it away going like, sometimes I think we need to be more present in the things we're doing and not be so hard on ourselves and enjoy the hard work that we put into something and enjoy the fruits of our labors and so forth, even if it's for a minute, and then, you know, head back down and back to the grindstone.
Yeah. And I will mention this for people that have been in bands for a long time in particular, that if you have to like psych yourself up to get excited to be on stage in front of like, you know, 2,000 people at a headlining show or something like that, there's something wrong with you. Like, you should just be able to walk out on stage and just realize, holy, whatever, I'm playing in front of 2,000 people who are stoked to see me just do my best. And if that by itself doesn't just pull the feeling out of you, then you should, you know, it's time to retire.
Actually, I'll add to that. My favorite part is when you try your best and it's just not your night, but you get off stage and people say how good you were, and you're like, oh, thanks, dude. Like, you don't ever want to be like, I played bad tonight, but they'll be like, oh, dude, like, you played so awesome and I loved your guitar solo. It's like, oh, thank God. Like, thank God you think that.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I really do sometimes feel physically terrible moments before I go on stage, because let's just say that being on the road, I have a hangover from the night before from headbanging, and I've been eating fast food, not because I love it, because it's just the only thing open, like, you know, 2 a.m. when we're off stage. And, you know, I'm beat up for that. Maybe I went too hard at the gym that day and didn't accidentally, you know, save enough energy in the tank for the show. And I feel terrible. And then I go out on stage and it's all okay, because the adrenaline and the feelings just hit, you know, and I really have learned to think less and just do more when it comes to being on tour.
Yeah, like that's actually a really good point. Like, it's, and, you know, just to kind of reiterate what I was saying, like, I didn't mean it like, oh, I played bad, I fooled you. Like, sometimes, like, the road is so hard, even if you are in a tour bus sometimes, just with, like, the hours of sleep and the preparation, and then, like, the food, or, like, you know, what you have going on that day, or did the in-air rig get lost in Berlin and we have to be, like, 4 hours there and rushing on stage. Like, sometimes you know, it's just tough conditions to live in, and then you have to then just turn it on, and you never know what you're going to get sometimes. It's like shaking a hornet's nest. Like, you know, are you going to get away from it, or is it going to break open and sting you? But, like, most of the times, like, at least with As I Lay Dying, which is, this is a new experience for me, is that, you know, we play so tight and the band's so, like, mechanical in a sense, where we're, like, all so snapped into a grid, where, like, we all have to be really fucking good every night. And I think, like, this particular lineup, 90% of the time we're on fire.
Yeah, it's a good feeling. And it's just a good feeling to be on the road, not stressing out either, because I think that over decades, people, their personalities come out, and you know, sometimes you just realize that certain people just naturally stress each other out or whatever. And to be with an entire, all 5 of us on stage, we have our quirks, like, don't get me wrong, you know, and we tease each other about them for sure. But just to be like, wow, like I'm really thankful to be on stage with these dudes. Like, I really feel good about it. So you gave me a second wind, and I've had multiple people come up and tell me that, you know, since playing with Ken, they're like, wow, it feels like you guys have a second wind. And it's no disrespect to anybody else that's ever performed with us, but it's just this is where we're supposed to be now, and this feels good.
Yeah, I'll tell a quick anecdotal story, but I agree. Like, even my career playing in Unearth for 20 years, and you know, leaving that band was really hard. But I do really feel like I have a second home here. But, like, it's funny, because when we first, like, all agreed to do this, and Ryan was, I think, the last one to kind of join up on this. I play on the same side as the stage as Ryan. I've never met Ryan in my life, like, literally up until rehearsals, and, like, we met for a day. We did some rehearsals or whatever, and we didn't really get to kick it. But it was funny because he and I poured, like, you know, some adult beverages and put them behind stage. We played our first 3 songs of our very first set in a sold out, like, Las Vegas House of Blues. And we went backstage, and he just looked at me, and I had my in-ears in, and I could see his mouth moving. I pulled one out. I said, "What's going on?" And he's like, "Do we get to do this every day?" And I was like, "Yeah, dude." And he's like, "Are you serious? Like this, like with us?" And I'm like, "Yeah, dude. Like, it seems like it." And we just cheers each other, and we've been happy ever since. So it's been a wild trip. And I agree. Like, to what Tim said, like, I just feel like fresh again. Like, I feel like, you know, I'm not trapped in old drama and bullshit.
Yeah.
Well, I would almost, and Ken, I know you and I have kind of talked about this, I think both on here and definitely separately, but I feel like there has to be some sense, I think a lot of people look at breakups and so forth, or whatever term you want to use for it, and they look at it as a negative thing. And a lot of times I feel like applying it to the band sense, a lot of times you see everyone when they started doing their new thing, they just seem way happier. And at the end of the day, it's like, it's the whole point of like anything you do, enjoy what you're doing. And if you're not, then like you need to move on, figure out something that does make you happy, even if it's not with these people. And, I'll kind of take it a step further and kind of share a little bit more about me, since you guys have shared so much about yourselves in this. But, my wife and I talk about the idea of divorce, not because we don't love each other anymore, but because I think it's a real thing. Like, what does it look like if we decide that we don't want to be together? Because inevitably, I think everyone's so blindsided when something happens, and then they just turn into the worst versions of themselves, because then they feel hurt and disrespected, whatever. But I think if the communication is always there and everyone's honest about where they are at with each other and themselves, I find that most of the time you're able to kind of move through things pretty easily. But I see so many people that it's like once they finally get and remove themselves from that thing that doesn't make them happy anymore, it's like they have, like the second one you said, talked about, Tim, like they just feel like a whole new person that you haven't seen, and they're thriving, and they're like being very who they always were, who they were meant to be. And sometimes I think that as much as it sucks maybe to have to realize that maybe like the people you think you're going to be with and do those things with, that it's even better sometimes to realize like it can be better. You just have to understand, like, you got to be real with yourself and other people to get there sometimes.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the things that's like a principle behind that is to maintain communication, and communication doesn't really happen on a productive level if people are in fight or flight. And so I think what happens sometimes, like with a situation like mine, like I have clearly a past that stirs up emotions for some people, understandably. Even when I reflect on it, stirs up emotions for me, and I hate that chapter of my life the way that many other people hate who I was back then. And when I try to have a conversation with somebody, and the mere presence of me just being there puts them in fight or flight, then there's no longer a conversation that can happen. And then so sometimes those people, either they are combative 24/7, or they shut down entirely and they're avoidant. And in either situation, there's no actual sitting down and just being level-headed and having a conversation. And so when that gets to that level, it's not even I'm not doing anything wrong in my current place in life by just being myself, but I do understand that my past can stir up an emotion in somebody, and that person's not doing anything wrong by feeling triggered or feeling fight or flight. And so I'm not mad at them for feeling those feelings. It just makes us essentially incompatible. And that's the best way that I've been able to understand some of the absolute like non-communication and total shutdown with past members. It's like, hey, I don't even know what the fight is. I don't know what the conflict is. I don't even know if there is conflict, to be honest. I just know that there's no more communication. And so how do you move forward other than just surround yourself with people you do communicate well with and that you do enjoy your time with? And that's where we're at right now, and it feels good.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, being a fan of As I Lay Dying and also being lucky enough to be friends with all 5 of the members that were the past touring band, it's like my outside kind of view on the whole, like, As I Lay Dying thing is just that, like, all the 5 guys that were in the past lineup were so different. And that's all I know. And like, Tim, I know you attribute a lot of stuff. You're like, oh, my past, but like, I don't think it's necessarily just that. I just think everyone has like a different view on the world, and it's okay, because in my situation with Unearth, like, I love all the guys from my band, but there got down to a point where my back was against the wall, and there was just like real differences. And I didn't want to hold anybody back. And I don't know what it was like being in As I Lay Dying or the band members or whatever happened with you guys. But like, I'm just speaking in generalities now. It's like, if you're in a band, you do have to understand, like, there's a serious dynamic that you have to have in order to function and coexist. And if you can't do that, you have to make changes, because it's just never going to be sincere or work.
Yeah, and the only reason I mentioned, Ken, I appreciate you mentioning that. The reason I mentioned my past is to take ownership for whatever parts that I bring to the emotional climate of the situation. But yeah, we all know internally that it's way more than that. If I wasn't part of the equation at all, and As Dying had a different singer somehow, however that would be possible, there still would have just been differences from those guys, even without me in the equation. And so I think everybody has a situation where they can be happy now, and that's what for old friends, and I say that because for guys I haven't spoken to in a very long time, I still look back historically as people that were my friends, and the only thing I could wish for them is that they would be in a situation in life now where they have the opportunity to be as happy as possible.
Yeah. I would even say too, like even this new era of the band too, is like the cool thing that we have going on right now is that all of us are very like-minded, and that's I think that's really tough because chemistry makes like good sports teams, good like good organizations, good everything, good bands. And if you don't have that, then the chemistry's off. Like you clearly see it. So I agree with Tim about the personal aspect of it, but yeah, like chemistry means everything. And as long as you like all can look at each other and think kind of similar, that's a pretty good start to the day.
For sure.
Kind of it just feels so grown up having like a conversation where you're able to kind of understand like it's not necessarily about right or wrong, it's just about like happiness for everybody and being able to like understand that if that doesn't include you, like that's okay.
Yeah. So
it's funny that there's three of us kind of in our 40s or older where we're just like it's okay, like life's okay. It can be even at its worst, as long as, like you were saying earlier, as long as you kind of have the things to get you through it. Like it's kind of amazing like what you can overcome when you don't think you're capable of it.
For sure.
Which I guess goes right into the last song on the record, I Never Quit.
Yeah. That one's actually.
I didn't really have anything for that. I just was like,
no,
that's a good segue.
Because I had to take a moment to sort of absorb everything and realize, oh yeah, well this is centered around the new Austrian Death Machine release, and gearing back towards that, it's like there's a crossover of friendship there because Rob Bailey and I are good friends, and I've known him for a long time, and he has nothing to gain from me. I have nothing to gain from him, even though he's doing very, very well in his area of the world, and I'm doing well in my area of the world, and we just always wanted to do something together, and it finally worked out. So it's a cool crossover between fitness and metal again, kind of like the Craig Goliath thing. And that's one of the themes that I wanted to explore. I just was more curious how those two communities would interact, and I'll probably see that a little bit more in the aftermath of releasing this record, which comes out in a couple weeks.
Well, I have maybe an odd question for you, like given the fact that you seem to be obviously like working out and exercising and stuff like that and taking care of yourself has been a big part of your persona and your identity for so long for fans of what you do. Have you ever thought about taking it to that next level and kind of getting more into like competitions or anything, or even personal training or anything?
I do actually do some coaching, and I will, like when I'm on tour, I'm going to the gym anyways, and so I'll coordinate. I can only work out like one person per day, but I'll my wife actually does the coordinating, and I'll before each show, with some exceptions and some days off, of course, I will go work out with somebody and train with them and try to pass along things that I think could be helpful. And a couple times people have actually helped me more than I've helped them. But in terms of anything more serious than that, like I actually am not as much into fitness as people might perceive. I know it sounds weird because I think the standard for what's considered a high level of fitness in the music industry is so low that I'm considered like, oh, like that guy's in like better shape than almost anybody in music. And I was like, well, cool. Like, I mean, that's not really like, just go to like your average gym. That's not really a huge compliment in terms of the gene pool in the world. I think that for me, I just want to go to the gym for literally like after I've warmed up like 1 hour a day, 5 to 6 days a week. I don't want to overly strain my body and overtrain. And I am there largely for my mental health because I learned from being incarcerated that if you don't have a physical outlet, that it will take a toll on your mental health. And everything, I've looked the same now essentially for a decade, and it's really not like anything mysterious. It's just that this is what I do, And I have friends that compete and do all that kind of stuff. And me personally, I don't think that working your butt off for, 18 months or however long it is to prep for a contest and having a bunch of out of shape people sitting in a panel telling you what they think about your body is like a very healthy thing in general. So and then maybe this makes me like, a little scared, but I'm not really into wearing like a man thong and like flexing my butt in front of a bunch of people either, so.
You say that here in a podcast, but it's not like that on tour.
Well, no, I said a bunch of people, Ken. It's okay to do that for your friends.
Oh, thank you.
The intimacy of the backstage, but that's it.
Well, apparently, Ken, he needs some of that grease that you're holding on to for your wrestling gimmick to then slather on him for the competitions.
Yeah, and I have plenty of friends that wear their mankini thing or whatever you call it, and flex, and they look, and honestly, their hard work is incredible. And I have zero level of disrespect for what they're doing. I think their work ethic, like, it is worth being praised. It's just not particularly my thing. My thing is just consistency and health.
How long did it? I mean, weird question, maybe, but like, I mean, being okay, weird thing to remember because I don't feel like this is an experience kids get nowadays. But I remember walking into Hot Topic and seeing For Words Collapse and Our Lady of Annihilation by Most Precious Blood, and I was like, these album covers look sick. Put them on the headphone thing they had on, checked them out. I was like, buying these immediately. But it's like, I remember you being, quote unquote, the kid from that to how you have become. I mean, from what I kind of remember, like maybe around Shadows of Security, but really beyond that, like in your more physical peak, like look. What was your goal? Like, where did your fitness journey kind of start? And like, was it something you always wanted to do, or like, how did you kind of start the journey for yourself?
So it's a really specific answer because I remember being very conscious about it. So when I was like, 18, I played not college football. I played high school football, and I wasn't the only MVP on the team. I was one of the two MVPs on the team, and maybe mine was like the hey, this guy's a nice guy. He's maybe not the most talented guy, but we really appreciate him kind of award that I got. Whatever it was, I was doing well as a high school football player, and I had a handful of college football opportunities. And then in the 11th hour, I'm talking about with 1 week left to make a decision. I sat down with a mentor of mine at the time who said, well, do you picture yourself doing that for the rest of your life? And do you want to work, 60 hours a week training for football for nothing because you're not going to get paid for it or anything? And he said, is there anything else that you're more interested in that you would be doing the rest of your life? And I've been playing guitar for like
paid to do music.
Yeah, I've been playing guitar for like 6 months. I was like, I don't know if I'll ever make a living doing this, but I really love music. And without knowing it, this dude sort of talked me out of doing the whole college football thing. And I then just kind of sunk my teeth into music and just never touched a weight, never stopped working out, and just was like, I'm going to get into music, and got into music all the way until I was 30 years old. And then I remember seeing some of my peers, I'm not going to call them out by name because that's like disrespectful, but a lot of the bands that came from our era, I remember seeing some of them go on stage and was like, dang, these dudes are in their 30s now, and they like really look like they're way past their prime already, and they're only in their 30s. 30 is not that old, And I was like, right. Dang, like I don't want to be like visually past my prime when I'm feeling like creatively in my prime. And so I said, well, I'm 30 years old, and I'm on my 30th birthday. I drank too much. 30th birthday, day two of that year, I went to the gym, started working out, and it just gave me a reason to stop drinking, really, because I was like, I don't want to destroy my recovery. And I wouldn't say I was like an alcoholic in the sense that I think a lot of people in my life knew it, but I was an alcoholic at that time, and it just immediately gave me that reason to stop drinking alcohol that I sort of like had been wanting for a long time. So I got really, really into fitness, and then took that into too unhealthy of a way as well. Just as has been like my pattern in life to take something good and then take it too far and become unhealthy with it. But that's really the origin of my fitness journey. And now I found that place where like my goal is to go to the gym for an hour, be healthy, take care of my body and my mind. I don't have a desire to like impress anybody. I don't take my shirt off on stage. You know what I mean? I just want to like do what I do every single day and have it be replicatable until the day I die.
Was the guy who talked you out of going to football the same guy in the Twisted Sister video where he was like, "What are you gonna do with your life?" And you're like, "I want to rock."
I mean, that's the. I wish the story was a little more animated like that. It was more like a dropping some like deep knowledge. I thought about it, and it was just like sort of in the quietness of my own home. I thought about it, the next day, and called in and canceled my application to that college. Not canceled, whatever it is when you don't accept the offer. And I just decided I went to local community college and just started taking classes while pursuing music.
I'm just letting you know, if there's ever opportunity to make a movie about your life, I am going to depict that one scene a little bit more Twisted Sister-esque.
For sure, yeah. I mean, yeah.
I'll do you a solid.
Thank you, appreciated.
I almost thought you were going to say that you were going to play a young Tim.
Oh, nice, yeah.
No, Tim and I have to actually recreate Twins by Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger on tour one of these days.
Well, then you're going to have to start degrading your health for a while because you're nowhere near that. So.
Yeah, I'll get a skullet and gain about another 200 pounds and just get shorter.
Yeah, gotta work on that.
I was gonna kind of to sort of wind it down because I don't necessarily want to take both of your whole evenings at this point. But I was gonna say, I feel like with Austrian Death Machine, I feel like it seems like the band kind of comes around when you're happiest in As Lay Dying. Like, is that, maybe that's just I'm putting something on it, but it seems like when creatively, that's really firing on all cylinders, it seems like here comes the next ADM record, and it seems like you're just in this good headspace collectively from one project going into the next. Is that something you can comment on, or am I just kind of noticing something that really isn't there?
Yeah, no, that's very accurate because it's fun, it's lighthearted, and then it becomes really cool. The music becomes, not in an arrogant way. I think the Quad Brutal record sounds as good, if not better, than a lot of metalcore bands where that's their only project. You know what I mean? But I feel like it starts from a place of just having fun, and I can't do that if I'm not in a place in life where I'm enjoying it. And there was a stressful era in As Lay Dying from 2017 until we worked with Ken, and it's not saying that anything's bad for any person. It's just like some interactions become very, very stressful, and there was even actual contractual things at the time that said I'm not allowed to do anything else without written approval from other people who wanted to, for some reason, said they were unwilling to do As Lay Dying unless they could contractually approve what I do outside of As Lay Dying, which was a really weird, controlling kind of narrative there. And so even if I wanted to do an Austrian Death Machine record back then, I wouldn't have been able to because of the controlling nature of some things that were being insisted upon. But even if I had been able to, I wouldn't have enjoyed it because the association with music at that time was so stressful. And now I just this new record. It's maybe taking forever. It's definitely taking forever to get this new As Lay Dying record mixed. But I enjoy making music. I can only speak for myself. I just really love making music again. And so in the downtime waiting for the As Lay Dying record to get mixed, I was like, I might as well write a few songs here and there. And next thing I knew, I had an album.
Do you find you seem like someone that's not good with downtime? Are you what do you do when you're not making music? Not I guess that's kind of maybe a personal question, but it seems like, because it seemed like when As Lay Dying wasn't doing something, Austrian Death Machine wasn't doing something, then here comes another new band that you're doing, and it seems like you are not one to really enjoy just sitting and being and enjoying just downtime.
Well, yes and no, because if you were following me around on a day-to-day level, I don't overwork myself, or I'm not stressed out by any means. But imagine taking a person who just biologically has an overactive brain like myself, and then you force them to just sort of stay off the grid for however many years. Even when I'm not incarcerated, I had all those contractual things where I just I had to ask permission to wipe my butt. You know what I mean? It's now you finally have a guy who can just do what he wants to do and just enjoys making music, and it's you've all those years that I sat there being like, dang, I wish I could do something about this, and I couldn't do anything. And now it's like, oh, now I can do anything I want. You know, it just feels good.
I think it's always interesting to hear how people are able to, when they don't have something, figure out how, when they get back to the thing, like if it's after an accident, I'm never going to take blank for granted again. I'm never going to do this thing, or because when I don't have it, I realize it makes me feel a certain way. So it was just kind of interesting to maybe try to correlate, like, was there like, have you always been that way? Like, have you always been someone that's like, I'm playing football. If I'm not playing football, then I'm studying. And if I'm not studying, then I'm writing music. And if I'm not doing that, then I'm working out. If I'm like, you know, the old adage, there's only 24 hours in a day. What are you doing to fill it? But I feel like, to me, from an outsider's perspective of just like constantly seeing you working on all these different bands and doing all this different stuff, it's like, man, like, how do you compartmentalize your life to where it's like, okay, what does Tim do when he's just hanging out, not doing any of these other things? What does that look like?
Yeah, and the probably missing part of the equation there is that I don't really like to like party past this certain point. If my friends are all hanging out, I'm social for sure, and I'm not a buzzkill by any means, but like I don't really like to drink past a certain point. Like I really don't enjoy drinking at all personally, so it's just usually if I'm at a place and somebody's celebrating and they want me to have a glass of champagne to toast them, you know, for their marriage or whatever, like I'll do it for that sake, and that's it, you know. But so it just affords me so much extra time when like everybody else is recovering from whatever they've gone through, and I'm sitting around, and I feel like I have a hard time going to sleep at the end of the night unless I can reflect on my day and feel like I was productive. And so for my mental health, I have to do a certain amount of things in the day, and it's just finding that balance of like feeling productive but not stressing yourself out. And for me, it's a very high output situation. Like I do a lot of things, but I don't do them in a stressful way.
What is something maybe that you haven't gotten to do? Could be musical, could be anything that you want to accomplish before, like in the next 5-10 years, that maybe would surprise people.
I've done some pretty cool work with there's an existing nonprofit. I didn't found it or anything like that, but that allowed me and a friend of mine to work with previously incarcerated people or people coming out of addiction treatment, so help them get back on their feet and to find meaningful employment, find stable housing to where they're not going to be relapsing and stuff like that. And so in that situation, like I don't really have like a ton of time to help on a daily level, and the people that I partnered with end up doing the vast majority of the work. But when I wasn't certain if I'd ever have a chance to do As I Dying again, I was at school trying to get my Master of Social Work, and I actually did. I finished the first year of the program, started doing my internships and everything. So that, and then I was told that because of my felony, they wouldn't be able to license me. And I decided, well, if I'm not going to get licensed, the best way I can help people is almost like an administrative part. And I that's why I did like and I've realized that as a person like Master of Social Work, but unlicensed, I could accomplish more by just having normal conversations with people than I would if I was like sitting there in a formal office license, like doing quote unquote like professional therapy with these people, right? Because for a lot of these people, they just want to know, like, hey, is there somebody I could call? Like if I run into I've never been to the DMV before. I've never, some of these people have never gotten health insurance in their life before, and it's like just knowing that they could call somebody, and if I had more time in my day to be more involved with that is like very, very, very meaningful. And every time I have a day where I put more time into that, I feel amazing about myself. So selfishly speaking, I think if I wasn't doing so much music, I would do more of that, because it really does feel pretty awesome. Like when you help somebody, and it was the smallest, easiest thing for you and I to do, because we've just been out in society functioning like normal society people for however long. And it's like, it's not even complicated. Like, how do you open a bank account? It's not complicated to you and I, we walk somebody through it, and then them to tell you, dude, if you ever need anything for the rest of your life, I got your back. It's like the craziest thing. Right. It just took me like 10 minutes, Yeah,
I think that's I don't know. I think they're like having a friend who went through something like that and having to see them kind of reacclimate to life. It definitely feels like at times, speaking from my own perspective of what I saw, that a lot of the systems in place are set up for a lot of people to fail. And, a comment that I remember a parole person making to my friend at one point was just like, well, how did you get this job? How are you getting there? And it's like, I have a good support system. I have people that are willing to help me throughout this whole process and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, it was one of those that when I kept hearing the problem, like the almost the negativity of like, well, how are you going to do this? How are you going to do this? And it's like, I thought the whole point was that I'm supposed to do this, and this is how I get reacclimated. And if you didn't think I was ready or able to, then like, what are we doing? And it just felt good to be a part of that community and that support system to help get my friend back to where, they're thriving now and doing really great. But it was really, really eye-opening to see like what that process really looks like from the ground up, and like how hard it really is to start anew, basically, like just little things where you're like, I got to get a phone, I got to, all these things. And it was just like, yeah, don't you just do that? And it's like, well, no, because there's parameters now in place and all this stuff. And you're just like, it's really wild to see it like firsthand.
Yeah. I mean, so you know the feeling, and it's really cool. Most guys coming out of those situations, they just need to know that somebody's there for them, even if they don't need to actually pick up the phone. Just knowing that person would if they needed it.
Yeah.
I'd like to add too, like, Tim and I unfortunately just buried one of our good friends, and I was coming home from the airport, going home to the airport, and Tim was nice enough to let me, borrow his, as I call it, the Lambeater, a car. But the cool part is that like here I am, like burying like one of my closest friends, if not my best friend in the world, and like, I'm really down. And Tim's like, oh, dude, like my friend, who I'm helping through this program is, like he's going to get this car, and I've been helping him like do this and that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, first of all, I was just amazed at how much Tim did for this guy. But then secondly, like I had this like moment where I was getting driven back. Well, I drove myself to the airport with this gentleman like in the car, and he was the nicest guy in the world. His life, like, unfortunately was just beginning at the age of 30, and he was the sweetest guy in the world. And like, here I am, like thinking like, I just buried my good friend, but like, here I am being dropped off by like, this guy whose life is just starting. And it was like so serendipitous. And like, I actually needed that in that moment. And it's like, if it wasn't for Tim and like what he's done, like in that program, like I wouldn't have had that amazing experience either,
Yeah, R.I.P. Otto as well, by the way.
Yeah.
So I guess the last question for you, it's twofold. One, does Arnold know about Austrian Death Machine? Do you have confirmation that he's aware of the project, and do you know how he feels about it?
I've only heard rumors. They're not very credible, so I'm gonna say yeah, not a rumor. I'm gonna say that it's still 50-50 at this point whether he's heard it. I do always wonder in my mind, I'm like, man, because I feel like all my good friends in life, we kind of, I don't know what the proper term is in our day and age. We bust each other's balls, like we just give each other a hard time about small stuff, but it's like a loving way to like, point out each other's quirks. And so I always wonder, like, I hope he like understands that even when I'm like sort of teasing, it's actually like a tribute. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Yeah. I'd be very, very curious to get some feedback at some point.
Do you think? I mean, I feel like the end goal has to get him to be on a track at some point.
Yeah, not a pre-recorded inspirational speech of his, but actually him. That would be. I mean, there's really no reason he would ever want. There's no financial gain that would be worth it for him. But if he did it, that would be like the most metal credibility in the world. It's like, dang, dude, Arnold just did that. There's not enough money in it for any other reason than that he like loves metal.
I feel like it would be a thing where, like, because I feel like at this point in his career, from a complete outsider who has no knowledge of anything about him, but it seems like he understands who he is and would, like, do that. Like, he would give back in this situation. Like, it would be like, no, this is a thing that people like. They obviously, it's kind of celebrating my whole career. Like, yeah, why wouldn't I want to be a part of this and kind of bring it full circle? Like, it seems like the dude always, like, even if you go back to, like, the Mr. Olympia stuff, he always went back and gave back to them, just like he has seemingly anybody that, like, has shown him love and support.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things in my life that are happening that I didn't even know if I'd have a chance to play music at all ever again, publicly. Period. So it's definitely a possibility.
What what does Austrian Death Machine live look like to you now? Like, what are some things that you want to bring out to this, live package now, as far as visuals or stage production and stuff? Like, what would you like to see it become?
So for me, as long as I don't lose money, I want to spend all of the money on making like an epic stage show because, like, to me, this is not how I pay my bills. I just have a great time. So there's all these like 8 foot tall endoskeletons that require like a really industrial like 3D printer to create, and so I trying to figure out how I could get like multiples of those built for like somewhat of a reasonable cost that I could afford in like a tour budget. And then all the guys that I'm performing live with and will be performing live with, they all kind of have like their each own individual character, and there's so many skits between songs that we have. So basically, it's song skit throughout the whole set. It just makes it fun, and I know like Death Clock has their kind of thing, and Guar has their kind of thing. And there's a few bands in our genre that like have fun and make the show like an experience more than just like getting up there and playing the songs. And I think that's sort of like the idea there is like Guar being a perfect example. They don't really sell any records. I mean, no disrespect. I mean, relative to like a band that fills a venue as big as the venue that they fill, right? So
Yeah.
it's about the experience, and I feel like there's a cool thing where it's like I put out a great record. I'm really proud of the album, and so if you can tie that in with the like epic stage experience, that's the goal.
I almost see it becoming like that Universal Studios thing, that Terminator 2 3D experience thing that they used to do. I don't know if they still do it, but I could almost see it being that. But it's just like people dropping down, like slinging riffs and shit like that. Just like maybe that's more of a Ken thing. Just
I want to be lowered
playing riffs.
Yeah, I want to be lowered from the ceiling for sure. Being 250 pounds, if I'm on like some sort of cable rope thing, the guy on the other end's got to be, decently strong to lower me down. but
hey, I mean,
but
they're able to do it for Paul Stanley, so
yeah. I mean, Paul Stanley and I are almost the same size, but and we almost have the same size budgets, right? The Kiss budget and the Austrian Death Machine budget, they're almost the same.
Yeah. Well, I mean, then you could just start franchising out your Austrian Death Machine, so it's touring in little pockets. Since that's their whole thing now is avatars and licensing deals to you could be Kiss, I guess.
Yeah, there was talks like back in the 90s about how Kiss wanted to do that, to where they had multiple, like one version of Kiss touring Europe at the same time as another was touring the US, and so it's like now that they're in their hologram state, they can finally do that.
I was trying to do that with Unearth. I was trying to do that with Unearth years ago because Buzz was a janitor for so long. We had get so many fill-in members, and whatever. I was like, we should have 2 Unearths out, but there's not enough demand.
enough former fill-in members, but not enough demand.
Correct.
I guess last question for you: where can people find you, or anything you would like to plug online?
Oh, for me, what's funny about this is I have socials. I keep up with them the best I can, but I don't keep them on my phone because I'm trying to have that like healthy separation. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, if you search Tim Lambesis on any platform, it's either going to be at Tim Lambesis or Tim Lambesis Official or whatever it is. I can't even remember off the top of my head what each of them are individually, but related to Austrian Death Machine, some of those accounts got hacked back in the day, so I'm rebuilding those. So definitely need some follows on the Austrian Death Machine accounts, and I feel like with Austrian Death Machine getting the gears rolling, I like to do like a lot of more like special event kind of stuff. Like I want to do a Christmas EP this coming holiday and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like the gears just got rolling again, and I have nothing limiting me and holding me back, like we already talked about earlier. And so it's worth following and checking out all those accounts because there will be a lot of cool stuff on the horizon.
Are you someone that does TikTok?
I don't, but I probably should, especially with like the Austrian Death Machine style content. It seems to make obvious sense.
Yeah, I just don't get it. I'm old. I don't.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for me is that the people really in our music scene, the people really thriving on TikTok are not all of them. I can't speak to all of them, but some of them are like, wow, like that feels a little weird to me, like that, and it's working for them, but it's just not really my personality. So
Yeah, I just went and checked out a band, like a bill that was mostly all like up and coming bands. Like I think the first of 3, they're getting ready to open. Like they're the first of 4 on that Word Alive Asking Alexandria tour that's in Memphis Mayflower Run. But it was kind of crazy because like I was looking around and said to my wife and a friend of ours, him and his wife were there, and I was like, "There's a lot of women at this show." Like I like not hating on it, I'm just very surprised. And then my wife and my friend's wife just pulled out their phones like, "Oh, the bass player of this band Archers has like 1.3 million TikTok followers," and da da da. And I was like he himself or the band? And they're like, "No, he himself." And I was like, "Oh, that's what about the rest of the guys?" And they're like, "Oh, no, not so much." And I was like, "That's weird. Maybe I don't know." And then it was kind of interesting to watch everyone like beeline over to his side of the stage when he was playing, and I was like, "Man, I don't get this app. I don't understand its purpose. I don't really know what it is for. I don't know how to use it. So I just sit on the sidelines and can like throw my fist in the air like an old man. I don't get it."
I get it for the comedy content though, because I don't.
Yeah.
My wife does, and every once in a while, she'll just insist on showing me like 10 videos in a row, and it's like knockout video after. They're all great. Just somebody's just got to sort through the sea of junk material to show you the highlights.
Yeah, that's what my wife does. So apparently our wives are very similar in that regard, that they keep us hip, but also that we just have no interest in a lot of the content that they take in. But thank you so much for the time. This was something Ken can attest. I had actually, a while ago, had tried seeing if he would help me get you on for a different episode at the time, but very much appreciative of your time and the forthcomingness of the answers and everything, and very much looking forward to seeing you guys, you and Ken. You just got announced today, as when we're recording, you're doing the first after show for Up People here in Grand Rapids, so it'll be really cool to see you guys again and rip a hang. And I promise I won't be weird and watch you while you're having your moment.
Hey, I don't think that's weird at all. I think those behind the scenes things are pretty priceless. When I've done the same thing, watching other bands that I grew up, even more recent bands. So I get it. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for the time. Thank you, Ken, as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ken, for popping in, man. It's a good surprise.
So that was my conversation with Tim and Ken. Want to thank them both again for taking the time to chat, especially Ken, considering he wasn't even supposed to be on this chat at all. But ultimately, like I said already, I do think that him being there greatly benefited this conversation and just took it to places that I don't know that I would have taken it without him kind of helping push it in a few different directions. All of that said, though, the new Austrian Death Machine Quad Brutal is out now. Go check it out. Go pick up the vinyl. There's been some shows announced, and more recently, as I'm when I'm recording this, As Light Dying are hitting the road. They are going to be playing here in Grand Rapids at an after show for Up People Festival. Very much looking forward to seeing Ken and the dudes and getting to get some good hangs in. Like I said, try not to be weird and pay attention to Tim having a moment watching his band. But, I think even in that, I think it's something that I think is really something I've really kind of been noticing a little bit more is kind of just being, I don't want to say to beat a dead horse, but, essentially being present for the moment, even if it's not your moment, even if it's somebody else's. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I will kind of just sit there and watch other people do something, and I'll kind of notice a moment between people. And it kind of, I don't know, it just makes it feel good. It's like a human thing. And sometimes like it's rad to share in a moment, or even just to kind of have that moment, even if it's not being shared between the two people and they both know. But it's a thing where I just kind of enjoy seeing the human moments that are kind of tucked away from everybody. And I don't know, it sounds weird when I say it, but there was another gentleman that used to come into the bar I used to work at, and he would, I don't know if he was just creative writing, like just jotting something, journaling, if he was writing poetry. I don't actually know what he was writing, but I used to love watching this dude come in. He would eventually kind of open up to me and just start talking to me, more so than the other bartenders or anything. But it became this thing where, it was always interesting just to kind of see him find a corner, tuck himself away, have his one or two drinks and just kind of be alone with his thoughts, but in public. It's kind of the best way I can put it. But it's interesting. It's almost kind of like there's all the chaos of everything happening around you, literally, in a public setting, and you're somehow able to find the eye of the storm, for lack of a better term, and just kind of really focus on something that's important to you and to just do it, and find your inner peace within it all. And I think a lot of us need to do that more. I think we need to be more focused on grounding in some senses, but ultimately just kind of finding that thing that makes us happy, and kind of relish in it when it's happening, and not, instead of just always doing the thing I think too many of us do, which is just kind of focusing too much on the things that are going to be happening potentially, and fixating on those. So I'll get off my soapbox here of kind of talking about all that kind of stuff, but I really, really enjoyed this conversation with Tim, and I really hope you do too. Kind of start wrapping this up. If you would like to keep up with Austrian Death Machine, you can find them on Facebook at Austrian Death Machine. Instagram is at Austrian Death Machine Official, and Twitter is at Austrian Death. You can find Asley Dying at Asley Dying on Facebook, Asley Dying on Instagram, and Asley Dying Band on Twitter. You can also go to Tim's website, timlambesis.com, asleydying.com. And there was sort of a website link for Austrian Death Machine on Tim's Instagram, but it just really honestly takes you back to timlambesis.com. It's just like one of those like side pages on the website. So just go to Tim's website. And if you'd like to keep up with Tim, you can find him at Tim Lambesis, both on Instagram and Twitter. Keep up with him. Keep up with all the things that are going on. I should have asked, honestly, and I'm thinking about it now. I should have asked if there was going to be a new. I believe it's called Pryan or Pyron. I've never really learned how to pronounce that band name, but the other band he was doing, aside from Asley Dying and Austrian Death Machine, I should have asked if there was more of that coming, because I just feel like Tim is always working on something, and maybe it's okay, this is going to go to this is going to go to this. I mean, shit, who knows? Maybe there might even be a solo Tim record in the works somewhere, and who knows? But that dude seems to just live in his studio and just seems to live for creativity. So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe there's some other new music on the horizon, but we'll get to that whenever that happens. And if you like keep up with Ken, just find him on Instagram, Ken Susi. And do all that stuff. And Fishman, he hasn't been doing a whole lot of the Fishman lives or anything like that, but I'm sure there's always something going on over at Fishman. Go check them out. They're a great pickup company, do a lot of great stuff. I'm a huge fan of them. I've essentially been putting them in all my guitars over the last couple of years since getting a set of the pickups. So, and I'm not even that great of a guitar player, and I can notice a difference. So do with that as you will. If you'd like to keep up with the podcast, you can find us Simple Enough Brew Speak Pod on all your major social media platforms. And if you can, leave a rating, review, subscribe, whatever you can do. Share these episodes when they come out. Anything and everything helps. And I've been very greatly appreciative of everyone who has been sharing and commenting as of late. I know I've been beating the horse dead about how no one comments or says anything, but actually that has been turning around a bunch. And I just want to say it's overwhelming, and I thank you very much. And speaking of thanks, before I get out of here, I want to thank Rockabilia.com. It has been a wild week or so since they dropped the Burzum Kanye shirts. Looking forward to getting mine in the mail. I already spoke to that on the last episode that we did, but whatever. But just really, really appreciative of that company and Frankie and everyone that works there. So go support them. Go to rockabilia.com. Use our code Brutally at checkout. Take 10% off your total purchase order. Let them know that I am sending you, that you're hearing, all the great goodies that they have. There is... there is something coming that Frankie kind of was spilling the beans on, and I am very excited for everyone to see this because I think it's a great idea, and I'm excited to see the reaction to it because I know that it is going to garner a reaction of some sort. So keep your eyes peeled for that one. And without further ado, that is it for this episode of the Brutally Speaking podcast. I will talk to you all next week, where we have the returning Ray Hawthorne of North Kingsley, but we are talking about his debut solo album. If you're familiar with any of the times that he's been on in the past, it's always a great conversation with that dude, and we get into a lot of different stuff. So until then, I'll see you next week, and enjoy the rest of yours.